so many friends here. And since we are friends, I'll just let you know I got a message from Chuck saying that he's trying to get his second cup of coffee.
Okay.
I thought you'd understand that.
Yes. Oh, this is such a wonderful program, Sharyn. This is just marvelous.
Oh, it's fun. I'm really having fun with it.
Oh, yes.
And I'm
Wow.
glad to see you're back. Hi,
Thank
Stephanie.
you.
Hi.
Yeah, I was gone on a little trip, and then I got COVID, but I'm back. I'm back, and wow, this is quite a story.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Wow.
it is. So many layers.
Not to be confused with Nighthawk. Is it Nighthawks?
Right.
Yeah, at first I thought that's what it was, and then I started reading the story. I said, "Oh no, this is very different." Ooh.
I don't think that Chuck ever writes a story that's the same as any other story. I think
No.
he would get really bored with that.
No, I was just it was the name that was kind of similar. Night
Shift.
Yeah, Night
Right.
Shift. Yeah, that's what, because Nighthawks is so brilliant. And then, well, this is too, it really captures a moment in our lives.
Right. I think sometimes he calls Nighthawks something of an essay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because it's so close to what he actually did with August Wilson.
Right.
But
right.
I see it
essay
as
a better word. Essay is a better word, I would say, yes.
Hi, Chuck. Oh, you're not there yet.
He's almost here. Coffee.
Yeah.
I'll drink to that.
Stephanie has a haircut. Doesn't that look cute?
Oh, thank you. I did it myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's brave.
It's really short.
Yeah, nice.
Gary, you'll notice that a lot of people here know each other. This is Gary Houston. You can introduce yourself since
I'm Gary Houston, as it says in my label, and I met Chuck as a result of my playing Captain Falcon in a stage version of Middle Passage in Chicago.
Wow.
And Jody Solomon.
Hi, I'm Jody Solomon. I work with Chuck, and it's wonderful to see you, Sharyn. It's been many years, and I'm looking forward to your event today.
And Jim. Jim, are you there?
Jody, where are you based?
I'm based out of Boston.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I lived there for 25 years, Brookline.
Yeah, okay. I'm in Jamaica Plain.
JP.
Yep.
Hello, Chuck.
Chuck, good morning.
Do you have a cup of coffee? Do you have a fresh cup of coffee?
Right here.
See?
Is it Seattle coffee?
It is my own blend of Seattle coffee. It's something I look forward to whenever I wake up, Gary.
Chuck,
Well, let's see. I think I get Starbucks.
Can you turn up your volume a little bit?
Who, me?
Or is it mine? Maybe it's mine.
No, I think it would be good if he could turn it up a little bit.
Okay.
Who is he? Me?
He is you. He is you, Chuck.
Okay, it's as far up as it can go.
Oh.
Okay, that's better.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. How is this visual? I can try to log on my laptop, which would be a different view.
This is fine.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, this is
You
good.
lean in closer. It's a close-up.
Yeah, well, see, you're close up here. I'm more middle distance, and I think on my laptop, I'd be more close up like you. But do you really need a close up of my mug? I don't think so. Probably. As long as you can see an image here, I think
maybe after your cup of coffee.
Yeah, when your eyes open up a little more.
Okay.
You're fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
All right, I'll stick with this then, since it seems to be working with audio and visual.
and it's 11. I think that there might be a few more people who might join, so I'll wait about 2 more minutes if you don't mind.
We haven't had Jim McWilliams introduce himself yet.
Oh, I thought I mentioned you. Oh,
It's none.
I was away for a few minutes, but anyway, hello, everyone. Nice to see you again, Chuck and Sharyn.
Two.
Hi.
I don't actually know anybody else, but I
What
know
a
that
charming accent. Where are you from?
I'm in Tucson, Arizona at the moment, or not
Oh,
at the
okay.
moment. I moved here 5 years ago after retiring. So
Where are you originally from? Where did you acquire that accent?
in the Midwest, I guess.
Oh,
My
okay.
father was in the Army, so we lived all over the place.
Ah, okay.
Anyway, I retired from Dickinson State University in North Dakota.
Oh, wow.
So,
Well, I want to say too, Jim Williams is the editor for a book called Passing the Three Gates, a book of interviews that he did with me, published by University of Washington. Oh God, Jim, what year was that?
2005, I think.
2005. It's a magnificent book, and you put it together in a way I think that nobody else could. So I have to thank you for that book, and many other things as well. You know, friendship over the years and almost daily correspondence about what's happening in the world of politics and in general history, right?
Yeah, just a quick anecdote. Chuck went to my alma mater, which is his alma mater as well, Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. I think it was in '97, and I was a PhD student. And I knew the name, but I hadn't read any of his work. So I thought before he was coming back to receive an honorary doctorate and give a reading. And I thought, well, before he comes, I should be familiar. So I went to the library and got some of his books and just fell in love with his writing. And I wrote him a fan letter and sent him a book to sign a year or two later. And then in about 2003 is when I thought, well, there should be a book of interviews with Charles Johnson. And so that began our correspondence and then led to the book.
You have
What a wonderful background. Thank you.
a
and I see
fantastic.
Levon is here too. Maybe if we can see him.
Who's that?
Levon Hawkins
Let's live
from
on.
the anthology you did.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, Levon Hawkins.
Okay, Levon.
Hey, I can't see you, but thank you for showing up, Levon. Nice, nice.
Zoom always gives you a chance to be a turtle.
Oh, my. Very profound.
Well, you know, I feel I should be introducing all of you. Stephanie Hilbert is one of this world's most luminous spirits, and an actress as well, Gary. And Gary Houston is one of the most intellectually engaging people I can think of. Went to University of Chicago, majored in philosophy, dropped out of philosophy to work on journalism in Chicago, I believe the Chicago Sun-Times. Now, Gary is one of our most distinguished actors. Now, he said he was in the play Middle Passage, right, and played Captain Falcon. But if you Google Gary Houston, you're going to see that he has been in numerous films and television productions. Gary, could you say a word or two about some of those productions?
Some of the productions, well, television, Chicago has, except with the strike going on, but it has had an industry practically rivaling, well, I won't say the West Coast, that's be stupid, but quite a lot of Chicago shows that start with the name Chicago. Chicago PD, Chicago Justice was one that was short-lived. These are all Dick Wolf productions, and Wolf was the producer of Law and Order, the whole franchise.
Oh.
And so the Chicago Med and Chicago PD. Did I say Fire? That was another one. So that one, and then there's a series called Shining Girls or Ripple Effects. I can't remember which, but they're always coming up with a new one. There's one called The Bear, and I haven't seen it, so I don't know. But the movies were Fargo and Watchmen and Proof and the Blues Brothers and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and which is this year. And
That was great.
did you see, who said that?
That
Meredith.
Meredith Perlman, and I don't see myself on the in any form.
Well, you
No,
were a
these are
flower, Meredith.
Pretty
and that's-
flowers.
Oh, I'm Pretty Flowers. I
You were
can't
a
see that
bouquet.
myself. Oh, okay. Yeah. Did my name pop up now instead of
Yep.
flowers?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. It was so charming. I was quite taken with it. Excellent work, Gary.
Thank you. There's a sociological aspect to it as well as its audience. I don't think it made quite the box office figures it aspired to. And I think one reason is, even though it was a bestseller for years, and it was set in 1970, I think the readership were not so much girls of Margaret's age now, but women who in that time, 1970, were at that age, almost as if it's a matter of generation and not so much a time in life, which is curious because everyone reaches the same problems oftentimes at a certain age. So it shouldn't matter what the year it occurred was, but I think it does. And I heard there was a kind of a disinterest on the part of girls that age now, as opposed to I don't know if it's nostalgia or wistfulness for the past, but women who were that age now. If anyone else has a theory about that, I'd love to hear it.
Not yet. I think we're getting a few more people, and maybe we should get started in a couple of minutes. I see Ava.
Okay, I want to say one more thing, okay, before we get started for the group here.
I want you all to know that this is all being recorded. We can cut this, but it is being recorded.
Thank you.
Okay, I just
Hey,
want you to
Levan.
be aware of it.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hi,
Yeah.
Levan.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, this gentleman here is a fine writer who appears in an issue of Chicago Quarterly Review that I had the opportunity to be guest editor for. And the editor at Chicago Quarterly Review is that gentleman in the box, Gary Houston. And also someone else who appears in that issue, that special issue devoted to Black American literature, is Sharyn Skeeter, who is moderating this session right now. So again, this is a very distinguished group of people. Each person brings a world, I would say a universe of fascinating history and ideas.
Well, the fashionable word now is multiverse.
Ah, there you go.
Okay. Okay, so we can be fashionable. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, we need to start this, but I almost feel like I don't have to introduce Chuck, and that I can call him Chuck, because I think just about everyone here knows who he is. But just for the recording, okay, I'll say that Dr. Charles Johnson is a University of Washington professor emeritus and the author of 27 books. He's a novelist, philosopher, essayist, literary scholar, short story writer, cartoonist, and illustrator, and author of children's literature and a screen and teleplay writer. He's a MacArthur Fellow who also received an American Academy of Arts and Letters Award for Literature, a National Book Award for his novel Middle Passage, a Writers Guild Award for his PBS teleplay Booker, the W.B. Du Bois Award, and many other honors. There's also the Charles Johnson Society at the American Literature Association. And a few years ago, as we mentioned, Lifeline Theater in Chicago debuted the stage adaptation of Middle Passage. Dr. Johnson's fourth short story collection, Nighthawks, was nominated for a Washington State Book Award. With Stephen Barnes, he was nominated for with Stephen Barnes, he is co-author of the graphic novel, The Eightfold Path. And last year, many of his cartoons, let's say from high school to almost the present, were collected in a great book, All Your Racial Problems Will Soon End, the cartoons of Charles Johnson. So, Charles Johnson, would you like to say something about your work?
I think you've said just about everything that a person could say. I don't really like to talk about myself that much. I like to listen to other people and find out who they are, but I'll say some things about me that might get us going. As I think about me and my work, I think I'm probably something of an anomaly in American literature, and especially probably Black American literature. I've known writers like my friend, the late Stanley Crouch, who would say things like, I wanted to be a writer from the time I was a child. I always wanted to be a writer. And you and I were just at, Sharyn, we were just at the Ray Bradbury Center, which is someplace that I think everybody should go to. It's magnificent. There's $9 million worth of artifacts related to Bradbury's life and work there. And Bradbury always wanted to be a writer from the time he was a child. And me, I wanted to draw. I had the ability to draw. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. From the time I was very young, that was the only talent that I thought I had. And I was passionate about drawing and wanted to be an artist and an illustrator. And I had the opportunity to publish my first work when I was 17 professionally, and then go off to college where I took my published work and got on the student newspaper and drew for that for 4 years, as well as the town paper. I spent 7 intense years as a cartoonist and illustrator, but I also was exposed to philosophy when I was 18. And that became a passion, something that I knew I had to continue doing for the rest of my life. And so when I began to write fiction, novels, and short stories, my interest was in what that area that we call the philosophical novel. Because I didn't think we had a really strong tradition of that in America. The French do, Europeans do. But in America, we really don't. There's a few names that we can mention from the 19th century and the 20th century of intellectually engaging writers dealing with perennial problems, universal problems of philosophy. So my work was specifically aimed at opening that up. Now, as a writer, however, I would take assignments. So I wrote in about many other kinds of things, or screenplays, and, I did essays and, anything that a writer would do. But my home base is the philosophical novel and short story for the most part. And during the course of my last 75 years of living, I probably had to reinvent myself 3 times at least. The first time as a cartoonist and illustrator, second time as a philosopher through the PhD, the third time as a literary person. That is to say, I was hired in the English department because there were no jobs in philosophy. So I had to bring myself up to speed in terms of being a literary critic, literary scholar on certain matters and certain authors. And that's basically it. That's how I got to be here, and that's how I got to know all of you.
I just want to mention, I noticed that Elisa Duncan is here. We had mentioned
Really?
yes, we had mentioned the adaptation, that is the stage adaptation of Middle Passage. She was the director of that in Chicago. I don't see her or hear her, but I do see her name.
I'm sneaking in because I'm working. We just
Okay. Okay.
Hi, Elise.
It's good to know you're here.
Could I mention
Oh,
that
there you are.
Elisa
There you are.
directed
Okay.
both versions, because the first one was called Rutherford's Travels, and
Yes.
and that was at the Chicago Dramatist, or it was at Pegasus rather. That's Elisa's company. And then the second time was at, as you said, Lifeline, and the novel's title was restored for that, right, Elisa? Is she there?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Chuck, the first title was Rutherford's Travels.
Yeah, when I worked on that book for 6 years, I had the working title, Rutherford's Travels, because I wanted to get the spirit of Gulliver's Travels. And so the character, goes to sea and he winds up over here with this group of people, and over there with that group of people. But as the novel evolved, I didn't write it that way. So I came down to the last week I was working on the book, and I just said, okay, let me consider other titles. So I came up with 6. And the one that seemed to be most resonant and poetic for me was Middle Passage. It suggested much more than Rutherford's Travels. But yeah, I wanted that Swiftian feel novel at some point. At least it's really good to see you.
It's amazing and wonderful to see you. So
Okay,
I'm happy to be joining.
and I'm glad to see Diane is back. Diane Cotman is my co-leader.
Excellent. All right, now let me shift gears because you want me to talk about the story.
Right, and I also want to let people who are here know that this is a conversation. So it's not an interview as such. So if you want to join in, feel free. Okay, just because so many of you are new, I just want you to understand how this functions. So I might ask questions. Chuck and I might talk to each other, but everyone else is absolutely welcome to join in.
Please do.
Okay.
Please
Go
do.
ahead.
Okay, so the reason we're doing these series of discussions is because of the publication of this book, edited by Sharyn Skeeter, What's Next? I have been on hand every Wednesday that you've talked to other authors, and I was very impressed. You have assembled incredibly interesting writers with many different backgrounds and also from many different kind of groups, So I'm pleased to be one of them. I think also the fact that the Rainier Club is, sponsoring these discussions based on this book makes this very unique. This doesn't happen, to my knowledge, with other anthologies. So I'm very happy to be a part of this. Now, the story that I have here, Night Shift, was written during probably the beginning of the pandemic. That's the setting, in a hospital with a young Black man who is a security guard, like a friend of mine once was. So I was probably thinking here, of Harborview Hospital or something like that. But it's during the worst part of the pandemic. And he shows up for work one day and he has a moral dilemma that he has to deal with. Now, something I should say probably too is that my recent stories over the last few years, I've always tried to find a classic perennial moral dilemma to explore. Not to come up with an answer necessarily, but to explore the question. One other thing to say about this story is that I wrote it for an organization here in Seattle called Humanities Washington. In 1998, they asked me to be on their board, and all board members had to select a committee to be on. And so I chose their literary committee. And what they wanted to do as a fundraiser was have authors read their work. But I've read my work a lot, published work. And I said, listen, why don't we do this? Why don't you have writers come and read an original story and board members come up with a theme or a prompt? And they said, okay, let's try that. So the first year, it was just bedtime stories. The next year, it was insomnia. So for 25 years, they've had writers in Seattle create a new story and read it in the fall, usually October, to an audience for their fundraiser. And sometimes they make quite a bit of money doing that. Now, over the years, a lot of my friends have participated in this. August Wilson tried about 3 times. He wrote 3 stories and came and read them when he was in town, which wasn't often because he was usually off preparing one of his plays. But one of the fun things about doing this is we were supporting an organization that has programs to promote literacy. They have a program called Mother Read, Father Read. And also, it was just for the fun of it. I'd meet for dinner with August, And I would say, hey man, you got your story ready? What are you gonna do? And he would look and say, oh yeah, I got something, all right. And blah blah blah. We go back and forth like that. It wasn't for the money. It wasn't for attention. It was to exercise whatever storytelling muscles that we had. And so every year I've got a new story out of doing this for 25 years. And Sharyn can tell you, I just finished the 25th story about a week ago. And it took me months to do it, literally months to do it. I almost bailed out because I was so close to the material. So that's the genesis of this story. Night Shift. And again, it's about a moral dilemma that this young black man has. Now, I should probably shut up. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read the story, but if you had, I'd really like to hear what your reaction might be.
I have
What exactly is the moral dilemma? You were saying that there is a moral dilemma in this. So what is it? How are you framing it?
What is the moral dilemma? The moral dilemma is that the protagonist in the story, I think his name is Lucas, has a brother who has chosen an entirely different path from his and winds up in that hospital during COVID, being chased by the police. Now, the moral dilemma that Lucas has is he has to help his brother, but he is a security guard. He could lose his job. If you read the story, you know how it turns out. He does help his brother because while we can choose our friends, like all the people here in this room today, we can't choose our family. And these two boys have gone in very different directions. There's a lot of things you could say about them. Lucas didn't want to wind up being just another statistic. Like his brother wound up, his brother joined a gang, sold drugs, got in very violent activities. Young black men have to cross, I've said this many times in many places, a racial minefield. There are mines out there that you can step on and you'll get blown up if you don't listen to your elders who got across the minefield and want to give you some good advice. But if a young black male does not have, if he can't get to the age, he has to get to the age of 8 before what I call the culture of young black men will suck him up, just like it does his brother. Both of these boys have a very strong mother who tell them, just be human. All right, just be human. You don't have to get into this mentality of feeling the world is against you and you're a victim and everything is set up for you to fail. That's the narrative his brother has absorbed and one that he has resisted.
And they haven't spoken with or seen each other in 10 years.
It's been 10 years. He hasn't seen his brother. His brother's been in prison and is out now, but he's not going to change his ways. So my agent read this story, and she's a great agent. She said, well, Lucas should try to help his brother Jamal get out of this gang he's in, the Cobras. And Sharyn and I talked about this. No, he can't help him get out. He likes being in the Cobras. He likes this lifestyle, right? It's the lifestyle that Tupac Shakur gave a name to. Thug life. That's what he likes.
Isn't it also
He's an
family?
original gangster. OG.
He's an OG, right?
But isn't it
disagree.
also a family for him that he has established?
It is a family for him.
Our protagonist is all alone, and the only connection we see is with that he feels is for the nurse.
That's right. Yeah, he decided that if he had to be alone and try to honor his mother's advice, to do your best, whatever it is you're doing. If he has to be alone to do that, then he has to be alone. The other brother, he's got his boys. His boys are going to pick him up if Lucas can get him out of the hospital. But he's come in after being shot. So Lucas has the obligation of informing the police, at some point.
There's
It
another.
shows that, yeah,
I think
uh,
Jim had something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I want to disagree just a bit with what Chuck said. You suggested that he has to help his brother, and I'm not so sure that he has to help his brother. There were a couple of things. I don't teach anymore. I'm retired, but I would have loved to have had this story when I was teaching, because there were two stories that I used in my classes. One is Antigone, and Antigone has to choose between her family obligation,
Yes.
both her sister and her dead brother who need to be buried, brothers rather. Yeah, her dead brother. No, two brothers. She had two brothers that need to be buried, and then her sister wants, so she has family obligations. She has to choose between Creon's law of the land and her family. And then there's also Sonny's Blues and the Baldwin story, where Sonny is told, well, actually Sonny's brother is told that you must take care of your brother. If he made this promise to his mother and his brother goes off into drug addiction. So there are two stories, but anyway, back to the larger point, I'm not so sure we do have to always put family first. And the example I gave in my class, and this would always lead to with Antigone, lead to a good discussion. What about the Unabomber? His brother turned him in to the FBI. The Unabomber was killing people.
Yeah.
And so the Unabomber's brother put his obligation to the law, to the state, the safety of others before his obligation to his brother. So I'm not sure I agree that family always comes first.
Well, thank you, Jim, because you choose, Antigone to talk about, Sonny, these are perennial, obviously, moral dilemmas, right? You're going all the way back to the ancient Greeks. But you see the end of this story too. He helps his brother out, and he goes back in to check on Kamisha, who he has an attraction for, and then he calls 911.
Yeah, and his brother says to him, let me hold that cell phone of yours and I'll call the brothers to pick me up. After that, you'll never see me again. So it's not as though this is going to be a bond where they will see each other and
no,
that's it.
No, and I was thinking about the story after I wrote it. He says, let me hold your cell phone, because he's going to call his boys. Well, when the story opens up, Lucas gets to work and he realizes the supervisor has been trying to call him because some of the other security guards have got COVID, and so they can't come in. They couldn't reach him because he hasn't kept up paying the bill, for a cell phone. So that cell phone is not going to help Jamal at all. But I didn't realize that until the story was finished.
Also say that he will always be interwoven with your brothers, contaminated by his life, just as one day you will likely be infected by a virus so difficult to control. But unlike him, you'll survive all this as you did the racial minefields of your childhood and move on with your life. So in a way, you're saying he is always going to have this connection with his brother.
Yeah.
He never sees him again.
Yeah. He will always be connected to his brother in one way or another. He is not, however, responsible for his brother's actions. Right? I think that's that's a very important point. They make different choices, although they come out of the same background. And his brother made bad choices, and that's the moral dilemma. That's the moral dilemma that Lucas has to deal with.
I think that a moral dilemma can end up with a choice that is not moral. By that, I mean, if there is a blood loyalty, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the moral choice. It may be the more powerful choice.
Yes.
And so that you get out of the question of morality when something trumps morality, and pardon the expression. And so you free yourself from that particular discussion in a way as soon as you shuck off the whole idea of a moral decision has been made. It's no longer a moral decision. It is a decision.
Yeah.
It is not, but you've gotten out of the context of morality. You say, no, it's not a matter of what's right or wrong. It's what is actually meaningful to me personally, that I go on this side instead of the other. Whereas when we learn about dilemma, at least in philosophy, as you've got the symbolism of the bull and the horns of the dilemma. How do you handle it? You choose a weaker horn over the strong. I'm not sure which one it is, but there's one horn that's a little stronger than the other, or you grab the bull by the horns, and somehow that's going to solve the problem for you. But it remains in the context of the bull, which is what I meant by the context of the morality. But we, in real life, don't necessarily stick to that context when we're making choices.
I think that's, beautifully put. The horns of a dilemma, and he can go this way or he can go this way. Neither one of them are ideal, but he's going to have to act. Think about it for a moment. How many people have had a brother or sister, a father, who knows, who did something and came to them for help? Well, that makes them an accomplice.
That's right.
To the crime. That's the way law is going to see it. They could lose everything just because of that association based on the accident of their birth. You can't choose who your siblings are going to be. Now, I say all that having been an only child. So I didn't have to deal with a brother who was wayward or a sister who was wayward. But I think that the moral dilemma is a universal one, and it's a timeless.
Well, when there's all this discussion with the word brother, remember, you took me back to On the Waterfront, where Marlon Brando, as Terry Malloy, has this argument with the priest, and he says, they got, it's my brother. And he said, I got to tell you something. You've got a lot of brothers, which is in a way the labor movement jargon for brotherhood of fellow workers. You have to make a decision. So right there, he is sticking with morality, because it's the presumed morality of loyalty to your brother versus this revelation of a loyalty you ought to have to your fellow workers, those brothers.
Yes.
But his brother is loyal to his gang brothers. He's more loyal to them, it seems, than to his own brother. He's, in a way, throwing his own brother out for whatever he's been trying to do. The ultimate, to me, the ultimate in this is not necessarily just the decision that he makes to let his brother go out, because his brother's in his nightshirt and barefoot and bleeding. So how far is he going to get? But the ultimate thing seems to be when he calls 911. It's as if he's really working toward that. He almost knows that that's what he's going to do. To me, Chuck, it seems like it's set up, because he's been going to school. He's been trying to do well on his job.
Yeah.
So it's been set up that he's got this particular background as a character. And it would seem very unusual for him to just turn around and take up for the gang. It just doesn't seem reasonable.
Well, the gang used to beat him up before Jamal got jumped into the gang and protected him.
Yeah.
Neither one of them finished high school, but the protagonist got his GED. He doesn't have a lot of money as a security guard, but he tries to read widely as much as possible and take online courses, which is something we can do these days. So yeah, you're right. I want to point one thing out to people here. Anybody who has a question about American films and movies, you can ask Gary Houston, and he will be able to give you a scholarly answer with multiple references. So if you got a movie question, the man is here.
Oh God, that embarrasses me. I hope nobody asks a question.
No one's embarrassed here, Gary.
Oh, okay.
I want to go off on another track, if I may, because I'm reaching back over 60 years and I probably have the line wrong. But you mentioned Antigone, and I'm thinking of Henri's Antigone, and I think her line was something to the effect, if I can't live my life the way I want to live it, then I won't live it at all. And I'm thinking that in a way, our protagonist is manipulated, but Jamal is living his life the way he wants to live it, and is as the only one that, he's admitted he's killed policemen, he's doing this, he's doing all this, and he's embracing his life in a sense.
Live
And the
fast,
only
die young. Yeah,
thing he does is he manipulates his brother on the brotherly love aspect to let him out.
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. He's living fast, and he's gonna die young. Sharyn and I were in Chicago. I forgot why we were there, but we took a lift from the hotel back to O'Hare. And there was a black woman driving, and she started to talk to us about what's going on in Chicago. And I'll never forget what she said. The young people that she knows, she said they don't feel they're going to live very long.
Hmm.
So they cannot get themselves to prepare for a future, because that's premised on the idea I'm going to be around here for decades. I'm going to live long. No, they don't feel that they're going to live very long. I thought that was heartbreaking. I will never forget that woman and what she pointed out to us. And Gary, you're right there in Chicago, so you see a lot of stuff.
No, I don't.
No, well, actually, in her case, it was in a way similar to these brothers, because she was apparently a supervisor in a factory or something where these young people worked, but she was also moonlighting as a Lyft driver. She was really motivated to do well for herself, or as well as she could. And what she was telling us was her, I don't even know how to put it in words, but her feelings for how these young men, in particular young men, didn't expect they expected to be shot before they were 20. And it was almost as if it was an honor to be, the way she put it, there was a term she used that they gave to each other for being shot before they were 20, and it was almost an honor. I won't forget that either. I agree with you, Chuck. It was really a
Sharyn,
devastating conversation.
Sharyn, did she say that he was a gang member or not a gang member? Do you remember?
These people?
The kid, the young men that she's referring to.
They were, some might have been in gangs, some might have just been on the street. It didn't seem to matter.
Oh, okay. That's what I want to know. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Diane? Diane, were you raising your hand? No.
No, she froze.
Oh. Yeah.
I really, as I thought of it, Chuck, I really saw it as what's happening in our U.S. Congress and on the national stage. We have a lot of people who are not asking, am I going to operate based on the Constitution and on the law of our land, since it's so corrupt, and they have a bunch of arguments on why, but are we going to do that, or are we going to stay, quote, loyal? And loyalty now has taken on this new a new level that I guess I had not been familiar with as I was growing up. I mean, I was really surprised at the current representatives in their behaviors.
Yeah. Well, this is something that does dovetail what you're talking about with this story. In the story, Jamal refers, and this is what gang members have done. I mean, I saw them say this 30 years ago. They refer to the cops as just another gang. The idea that just basically people organize themselves on the basis of gangs, strength in numbers and protect your own. And you talk about politics right now. That's a sensitive subject for me, because I think we are an extremely divided, polarized nation at this very moment, and it pains me. I don't want to contribute at all to adding fuel to the fire of the polarization and division that people are exhibiting. And you take this to the political level, people are speaking as Republicans and Democrats as if these are their gangs and these are their gang members and their brothers and sisters in a gang and the loyalty that you have to have. How can these people be loyal to Donald Trump? How is that possible? This to me is a breakdown in everything that I learned as a young person in school, and then I tried to teach as an educator. You know, this kind of tribalism that doesn't care about evidence or facts, or it is just locked into a gang mentality and a tribal mentality.
Yeah. But the trouble also, I think, is that the tribalization then means that the non-tribal side, or the non-Trump side, if you will, is then in a position of being accused of being tribal itself, and the justice system to deal with the criminality of the other side then becomes a part of the tribal scheme too. Yes. So that they become accused of being, well, what Putin is saying about the rotten American justice system. That kind of accusation then is hurled at the side that is trying to do good. So it's terrible. Talk about dilemma. That's a dilemma. That's the dilemma we're in now, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know how we get out of this, Gary.
No, I don't either. Yeah.
You know, it's tribal.
That's a different conversation.
Say?
I said dilemma or strategy, but that's a different conversation.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, Sharyn and I are both practicing Buddhists. Her orientation is the Tibetan tradition. My orientation has been my orientation for quite a long time, is the Zen tradition. And one of the things that we try to correct in our own thinking and feeling is the them versus us mentality, anchored in dualism. To get beyond that. But I see us moving in just the opposite direction right now. It's very much them versus us on so many levels, in so many ways. You know, there's an old saying, omni bellum contra omni, the war of all against all. And that seems to be the zeitgeist that I see out here in the world. It really hurts me every day to think about it. And you're right, Gary. Putin just made that statement yesterday about the corruption of American democracy being represented by the treatment of Donald Trump. But look at him. You know, anybody who opposes
it's all about some debate of, you know, who's going to win the race, who's going to, I'm sorry, I'm in the Rainier Club lobby. Who's going to win the race? Who's going to, who's going to, what do they keep saying? They keep saying, who's going to sell him out, or who's going to flip? I mean, what does flip have to do with anything? Who's going to tell the truth? That's what I want to know. Who's just going to tell the truth?
Yeah, I hate the language we use. The language is a language of combat, of winners and losers. And we have to be very careful. As writers, we understand this. Every word has to be considered for its impact and its effect on a listener, whether you're speaking, verbally, or whether you're writing. So the language that we use fuels, in so many ways, conflict, division. People don't listen to each other anymore. They've already dug in on the positions that they believe out of fear. They have to maintain against all odds. And this is not good. As writers and artists, I truly believe, and teachers, we have to provide an alternative to this. Starting K-12 and college, we have to get people back to a place where, they will listen to others and try to understand the other, not as my enemy, but as another perspective,
But wasn't this, I remember way back in the old days, they used to teach critical thinking skills in school and a class in ethics. That doesn't exist anymore.
Oh,
and
no.
in many ways, reality is highly overrated, apparently.
Oh no. Jim, tell this group what just happened at Dickinson State. Is Jim
You're
McPherson?
muted.
Oh,
I
Jim.
muted myself. It's happening at many institutions, as you probably know if you read the news, but Dickinson State is eliminating English. We didn't have philosophy to begin with, other than a course or two, but English, theater, music, art, and political science, oddly enough.
What?
But it's, and the faculty members are being let go. So any of the courses that are gen ed will be taught by instructors online from someplace across the country. But again, this isn't unusual. It's happening at many institutions, as you probably know.
I know. So the humanities, the liberal arts are suffering across, from coast to coast. Philosophy departments, are disappearing or being merged with other departments. Those areas, history and comparative literature, philosophy and English, foreign languages, all of those things that we used to talk about in terms of the humanities are losing ground.
Yeah.
There's a statement toward the beginning of your story that really jumped out at me related to this, and that is from the mother's view, when she does say to just be human. How can you just be human in that kind of environment? I think as you go on with this story, you begin to illustrate some of the ways you can't be expected to be human in the way that the mother seems to be expressing it.
Yeah. This is a dangerous time, and we've not seen a time like this, to my knowledge, in American history. There's a lot of tension pulling at the seams. One of the things you and I have talked about is, Sharyn, that is in the background, that is never always thematized or put in the foreground, is the racial demographic shift that is happening all over the place in our schools, where you'll have a school district where you got 90 languages just about being, spoken by the kids coming up. This is a moment of transition. And I think what's happening now, I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but what's happening today, last year, next year, what's happening right now, will determine the direction of Black America for the rest of this century. And America probably too.
Right.
Just to pick up on that just a little bit, I can here in Arizona and also happening in Florida and Texas. There's a move, though, getting back to what you said, Chuck, with the younger generation. There's a move to cut funding for public schools, as you probably know. And what's happening in Arizona is starting this year, $7,200 can go to parents who want to take their kids out of public schools and either put them in a private school or homeschool or Christian school or something along those lines. And the argument is that the parents get to choose. But the problem is that money, that amount, $7,200, is so low that a Black kid or a Hispanic kid from or a white kid from a lower class family they still can't afford they can't afford the private school tuition. Yeah. So the public schools, and in short, in the next 5 years, the public schools are going to deteriorate as that money is shifted from public school system to private schools. And probably no coincidence, a lot of the legislators, the GOP legislators, have investments in the private schools. So there's a lot of that sort of corruption. So I agree with you that the demographics seem to be showing this shift to a browner America, and we all think that's great. But if they're not educated, if they're stuck in these lousy schools, it's really a horrific future.
Jim,
for the people who are going into the private schools and the home schools, they too are at a disadvantage because they're getting a narrow education. They're getting an education that only reflects whatever their
That's
religious
right.
school is going to tell them, or their parents are going to tell them. So everyone's getting their own little tunnel vision as far as education goes.
Also, it's corruptible, isn't it? If
Yes.
homeschool is one of the alternatives, what's to stop these parents from pocketing the $7,200 and not teaching their kids a damn thing? I mean,
Right.
That's the problem. There's no accountability.
Yeah.
The public schools have to have tests every year to measure how well they're educating. There are no mandated tests. There's no auditing. There's no accountability whatsoever. What happens at $7,200?
Yeah.
And
There are no
all
just
that's happening in Arizona. I also know it's happening in Texas, Florida, and other states as well.
Jim, so there are no standardized tests for someone in the 8th grade, say?
Not if you're not in the
So
public. No.
Oh, yes, well, that's what I was saying. I didn't know it was quite that bad. The Native American people, the indigenous people, have their own school system, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, they do.
Up on the reservation, yes.
Yeah. About what Chuck was saying about humanities and higher education, I think there are two movements. One we're experiencing now with people like DeSantis talking about wokeism and associating, I believe, wokeism with humanities and related studies, the arts, the humanities, social studies, even probably, like political science. The other happened or started happening a couple of decades ago, if not more. And Chuck and I have traded emails about that, which was the emphasis towards trade. A trade education is all a college education is good for, to train you to enter a particular field of the economy. And therefore, humanities would be considered irrelevant to that purpose for college or university. So I think you're seeing the confluence of two streams there. One is practicality, so-called, and the other one is wokeism.
Yeah, and Gary, this goes back a long way. You're making me think of Booker T. Washington and the schools that he set up at the, after slavery. It was to teach people throughout the South in these, schools that imitated Tuskegee, how to be farmers. It was agriculture. And he made a point of saying he didn't think it was a good idea to be teaching French. Because what good is that going to do them, Now, who opposed that vision? W.E.B. Du Bois, of course, who had a much broader, more cosmopolitan vision than the one that Booker had, which was agrarian, and it was based on what he knew as a young slave, before emancipation. Those were the skills he felt would be most useful to Black Americans, vocational skills. But the other ones, and Sharyn, you have studied in French and Spanish and many other languages. I don't think you would feel they are irrelevant
No.
to the growth of a young mind. The whole point, of the first 2 years of college was to expose a student to all these things we're talking about for the development of that person as an individual and their character.
And critical thinking, which somebody brought up before.
Yes, and critical thinking. So let me pose a question to you, because what you're talking about, the homeschooling, the religious schools, and we saw last weekend in Indianapolis, we spent a lot of time with Sharyn, you and I, a young man. He's not young. He actually is the curator of the Ray Bradbury Center. He grew up in a family that homeschooled him and his brothers all the way through high school. And it was a religious education. They went to church 3 times a week, he said. And I guess he was inculcated to believe Black people were inferior.
Actually, he said that he wasn't in his family, which didn't mean that he wasn't told that in his larger community. But he made it clear that his family didn't seem to be racist. And,
yes.
I mean, relative to what he knew about the outside world, they didn't seem to be racist.
Yep. Well, all these things I think are interconnected. Literature, plays, art, um,
Music.
philosophy, education, they're all interconnected. So there's a ripple effect. If something's going wrong over here, it's probably going wrong over there. So how do we fix this as artists? I mean, I'm retired too, just like Jim. I'm not teaching right now, but as artists, how do we make it better?
Chuck, this is not off the subject, but in your own autobiography, at least an article that we printed, that you was originally your speech at Lehigh baccalaureate address. I think you talked about your father and the fact that he resisted some of the artistic tendencies that you had. And you eventually won his respect for those aspirations, but it it was a struggle, wasn't it?
Well, I told you, I started out passionate about drawing. That's all I wanted to do. And my father worked 2 jobs during 3 actually, in the 60s. He had a day job doing construction. He had a night job as a night watchman. On the weekend, he would help a elderly white family patch up, their house and little stuff like that. So I caught him in between 2 jobs. He'd come home from the day job doing construction. He's sitting in front of the TV, getting ready to have dinner and go do the night job. And I walked up to him. I must have been 13, 14. I said, Dad, I figured out what I want to do with my life. I'm going to be an artist. I get good grades in my art classes, and this is what I'm going to do. And he looks at me and he says, Chuck, they don't let black people do that. You got to think of something else. That was the one time I had to oppose my father, who I was the most moral man I think I've ever known. And I wrote to an artist, a cartoonist, and a guy who wrote detective novels under a pseudonym, Lawrence Laurier. And I said, this is my dad told me, is he right? And Lawrence Laurier wrote back to him and he said, your father's wrong. You can do anything you want to with your life. You just need a good teacher. So I held that letter up to my dad and I read it. He nodded his head and he realized, I guess I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And under my mother's urging, no doubt, he paid for my lessons for 1.5 years, 2 years with Lawrence Laurier. So at the end of that period, when I was 17, I began publishing all over the place and spent 7 intense years, as a cartoonist. The article you're talking about is called My Father's Pillow Talk, which has been, published other places. So yeah, what's the moral of that story, Gary?
I don't know. I was trying to think, since we were talking about such a broad subject as the survival of American civilization or whatever it is, that personal stories like yours are about the same thing if it boils down to the humanities and the arts, etc., versus the mindset that says get a job, make it a practical decision, etc. That kind of pragmatism. Well, at least we can give an ism to it, so maybe it's not as barbaric as we think it is. But
well, as a young woman who was a former teacher, a student of mine, said about this story I just told you, she said your dad was just trying to protect you.
Yeah, it's true.
And she's right, but he just didn't know anything about black artists. I mean, that was not his world.
And the difference there is, I think these people who I'll call them the DeSantisites are not trying to protect the rest of us. They're interested in power, and that's the big difference between them and your father.
I believe you're right. Well, for my dad, in his case, I always say, what is love? Love is supporting somebody in something they are passionate about that you don't even understand.
Mm.
That to me is how you demonstrate love. But getting back to this other question, and I think this is what's on the table, and again, none of us are going to come up with a magic bullet for it. The question of education, is education nothing more than indoctrination? When we talk about listening to others, teaching people, I always say it this way. We don't teach people what to think. We want to teach them how to think, right? All of this stuff comes out of the European Enlightenment, all right? These things that we're talking about are a vision. That's not true in other cultures. That we should, not be thinking in terms of them versus us or our own tribe. This is something very specific in the history of the human species that begins in Europe and spreads, to America, and is their foundation of these sacred secular documents that we believe in, whether that's the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. Is that what we're fighting for, Gary? Is that vision what we're fighting for? Is that indoctrination? Or is it just the best we can come up with as human beings?
Or the best we can come up with at the moment. I don't know if it's got to evolve.
There was Toffler's book, A Future Shock.
Yeah.
And he talks about the crack up of consensus. And I think that's exactly what we're experiencing now. We can't even agree on whether it's good or bad to tell the truth or what is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And the manipulation of media and special interest groups, et cetera, it's just staggering. So from your perspective, if you're in this tribe, let's call it the Trump tribe, you think that you are right and the rest is wrong. And they do not have, there's no interest in what if, or putting yourself in the position, in the shoes of somebody else, because empathy and compassion are not values.
Well, it's very hard to do that these days, unless you're like most of us who read a lot of different things. But people who say go to one website and who just look at that website and believe it's the truth. And it validates whoever they think they are. They're not going to go to another one. Why should they? Because they already know the truth, right? They already know what they think is the truth. The problem, in other words, I see is this new invention of what we're doing now, the internet, that puts us in these tunnels.
You've pointed this out before, and I'm glad you just brought it up again. The technology available, social media, all of that exacerbates the problem. You can go to these, you can be in a loop, hearing only your own beliefs and prejudices and so forth. Another question, it seems to me, that emerges in what we're talking about, Stephanie, can we have shared values? Can we have shared values? Huh?
You talked about your father and the love that he felt for you, even though his decision, he didn't know what your field was, et cetera, et cetera. But there was the one component, even though you didn't agree with what he said, it was love. I don't even think we have that going today.
Really?
I think so. I don't think so. I think I see that as disappearing constantly when I listen to the news and when I listen to people talking. I don't even know if they have it in their own families even. I mean, it's all about the money. It's this, that, or the other, just in a certain tribe that I'm referring to, as you can imagine which one. But you can see it on the opposite end of it, where you see a leader of this country being attacked because he not supports what his son did, but he supports the love that he has for his son.
Yes.
And he is being raked over the coals because of that.
Well, if that is a value that is in short supply, love, and you talk about that lots of different ways. We don't need to talk about love between groups. Okay, let's just have civility. All right, if we can start there, we don't have to love each other. We can just be civil to each other. But if there is a breakdown in the capacity of human beings to love, parents to children, children to parents, then I don't know where we go. I really don't know how we get out of this. But here's the difference. And I know this as a Buddhist. We can love. We can do this. We can make a conscious decision to be loving, compassionate people who care about other sentient beings. You take a stand as an individual. That's what you have to do. And you try to connect with other individuals who share that value. And maybe there can be a ripple effect somehow. But, it's an open question for me.
Fortunately, we've all chosen our tribe and we all are concurrent in our values, more or less, and the importance of compassion and empathy and love and values and honesty and so on. But how do we transition to those other tribes that are not even speaking the same language we are speaking?
They still have love. You can't, they don't love for their family and their tribes. I mean, much as I don't like you remember Gabby Petito's, I forgot the guy her boyfriend that killed her. It was his mother wouldn't tell on him. And so we had this huge, massive hunt, and it was very painful for Gabby Petito's family. But that mother believes that she did everything she did out of love for her son. The rest of us might not agree, but that was her motivation.
Well, that one was difficult to agree with. If your son is a murderer.
Did you just say he'd be better off dead because he couldn't stand being in prison? And that's the latest.
I don't know.
It's hard. It's very, very complicated. We certainly can't solve it, but I would love to figure out a way how we can communicate with other, when you go to travel, if you can't speak the language, you have a translator app. What we need is a translator app so we can learn how to communicate with these other tribes that that do not share the same values we have, particularly honesty, not telling lies, etc.
Stephanie, when we get to my story in the book, maybe we can talk about that.
Right.
Well, there's always the possibility that they do share values. They simply betray the values, that they act in bad faith, that they're disingenuous, that they don't want to act on the things that they embrace as values, because power is a factor and stubbornness is a factor, and fear is also a factor, which keeps a gang together, even if they have all along felt their values are the same, different from the leader, the beloved leader that they have. That's a fact. That's what tribalism mainly is. I'm not so sure the liberal society, as it was called, is itself a tribe. We might have been forced into watching MSNBC a lot, and that may make us tribal to extent because we simply do not swallow the stuff that Fox News presents, and therefore we are tribal too. But we think that we are students of the truth and not of falsehoods, and so we stick to what seems to have been substantiated and proven, etc. We trust the law to some extent because of judgments made there are, we believe, carefully considered and not manipulated by someone like the Kremlin or some entity like the Kremlin or the fascism or something like that. We trust that. We still trust the courts, and we don't think we're wrong or tribal to do that. So let's be sure that just because there are like-minded people who don't like this new phenomena occurring to us, that we are equally prejudiced, equally biased, equally capable of denying our own perceptions.
Absolutely. We don't see, there's a famous line I quote a lot. We don't see the world the way it is. We see the world the way we are, right? And what you're saying, Gary, you're saying trust too. You use that word a couple of times. See, that I think is what's up for grabs. These people, they don't trust the government at all. They don't trust the courts. All the things that we were supposed to believe in have been deconstructed. So I don't know how you bring people together when there's that kind of suspicion across all kinds of lines, whether they're racial or gender or religious or ethnic or whatever. I can we as a country even produce a human being, a president or whatever, capable of unifying all of these splintered groups?
I don't think it's Elon Musk.
No,
Sorry, I don't.
but he's trying.
Maybe
No,
we need
I think
Bradbury maybe we need a Ray Bradbury or somebody from outer space to get us
Okay.
on the channel.
Bradbury is one of this country's great storytellers.
Yes.
I grew up with this guy, reading his stories because he's very accessible. He can be read by the young. He admired Steinbeck, and Steinbeck is very accessible for the young. But I'm going to tell you about this guy. My teacher was John Gardner, who I thought was the hardest working writer I've ever seen. But the advice that Bradbury gives, there's a book called Zen and the Art of Writing. I read it on the plane last week when Sharyn and I were going to Indianapolis. He wrote and suggested people write 1,000 words a day. 1,000 words a day, and read poetry every day. And he himself, first and foremost, was a poet. That's what you get in his sci-fi stories. Not hard science. It's the poetry of the human spirit. And also, the stories give us a sense of mystery and wonder. I'm a big Bradbury fan, more so than I was when I was young, after going to the Bradbury Center. Yeah, I recommend it to everybody.
And I wasn't, but now I am. I'll say one thing to add to that. It wasn't just the literature, the poetry and the fiction that he was saying that we should read and know about. He was looking at all the arts. In that book, he mentions music, theater, film, all kinds of things. In other words, to be open, to be curious about the world. And I think that's what's really important.
And he really emphasized the importance of literacy and education. What is Fahrenheit 451 about? Book burning, right? And Gary, you might find this interesting. He was good buddies with Bertrand Russell. I mean, his impact on the world during his time, it's all there in the Bradbury Center. So yeah, I recommend the guy. I think he's inspiring.
Well, you're mentioning Bertrand Russell. Do you remember what did Bradbury take a stand during Vietnam? Do you know?
I can't remember. He took a stand in terms of the civil rights movement. He took a stand in terms of that. He took a stand in terms of humanity and was very much opposed to conformity, mindless conformity. You see that coming up in his stories repeatedly. It's in Fahrenheit 451. It's in a story he wrote called The Pedestrian. He really emphasizes the importance of the individual, and the individual needs to read poetry. And when you're an artist, you find, he's real big on the subconscious too. You find what it is you have within you that is unique. And that's what you put out there. It might be a struggle to find it, because you're imitating other people sometimes when you're younger, but you find your own vision. And here's what Ralph Ellison had to say about this that nobody talks about anymore. My famous Ralph Ellison quote: what Americans have to learn over and over again is that they are individuals and have the responsibility of individual vision. And there's a corollary quote from Baldwin, who says that to be a man, you have to be able to stand by your individual vision as if it's different from everybody else's. I think that is a universal truth of the arts and a universal truth of the sciences for scientists who had to oppose other scientists, right? And like Copernicus, and it's so important. And if we don't teach those things and create art that will let people feel those things, then I think people break off into their tribes and never come out of it.
What about the that metaphor of the well running dry that Fitzgerald talked about towards the end of his life? We couldn't really. He thought he had exhausted his well. If that's true of any of us, how do you fix it? Do you try to dig a deeper well?
But the mill is a well is a metaphor for what? Creativity?
Yeah, inspiration. You've exhausted the ideas you think of. You look into your past. You write some kinds of stories that you can draw upon it because you know it's authentic because it happened to you.
Right.
You can trust that. So, but I think he was saying, I've run out of. I'm only going to retell what I've already written before and probably better before. And so I don't know what to do. And of course, as you know, he died of alcoholism and other factors. So
Right.
but if there's some truth to that there is such a thing as a well for a writer to metaphorize into his creativity, is there something that you do to
Well, I mean,
counteract that?
I have a lot of thoughts about that. I think it is an honest human being who will say to himself or herself, I've done everything that I can. Ellison was continually asked about, where's your second novel that you promised us, right? Yeah. But he told one friend, I think I said it all in Invisible Man. But because he had committed publicly to doing a second novel, he worked at it for 37 years. And he still, if you listen to John Callahan, the executor of his literary estate, that novel was never ready, even by the time he died. Okay. So I think it's okay. There's nothing wrong with saying, I've done what I needed to do. I can step away now because I'm not trapped in the identity of being a writer.
Gotcha.
I just wrote. I wrote as much as I can, as good as I can, and I don't have to call myself a writer. I can go off and fish. I can spend time with my grandchildren. You don't have to do this. I tell young writers all the time, do not do this to yourself. Don't define yourself as a writer. Just create. Because a lot of baggage that comes with that term, writer, right? And I don't like any of that baggage. I don't. I don't care for it. So that's one way to approach this. Another way is if you still have stories to tell, do them. Do them, that's all, and don't worry about the kind of crap literary critics worry about. Where's your next novel, okay? Or that's not important. This is your relationship to your talent, right? Which nobody else, and your talent should be your guide, nothing else. You don't have to satisfy anybody in terms of what you're talking about. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say we've gone over time, and I don't mind doing that because we started a little bit late. So let's just wrap up like in about 5 minutes, if that's okay.
All right.
Is this okay? Is there something you'd like to say to finish?
Well, several of the people who kindly showed up for our session today, I correspond with in email all the time, just about every day. I was hoping we could hear something from some of the other people. Jody Solomon showed up, and Lee Van, I see his face there. But I'm just happy that you joined us for this session. I'm happy that you and the Rainier Club made these discussions possible.
Yeah.
Chuck, I just want to say, I knew you were a laureate, but I had never really read your writing. And then I read your book.
Shame on you. No,
I know, shame on me. I admit it, because I read now I'm obsessed, but back then, and then I read Night Shift, and I'm a writer, I'm not a great writer, but I know enough that you always look for every, what word can be eliminated, what word can be added. What is the perfect word? And so not only did I try to find it, I kept on finding it because I just kept on seeing, well, how could I improve that sentence? I couldn't improve one sentence. So then I became the fan club. And now I can't stop reading everything you write. So thank you so much. It's so insightful and so well written.
Thank you, Diane. Well, you're just describing what we all know as the creative process. My ratio of throw away to keep could be 20 to 1. I just finished a 10-page story, but I spent weeks on it. It kept changing as I was chasing it. But I do think in the story that I just finished, you cannot pull out a sentence. Because if you pull out a sentence, the one in front of it and the one behind it will collapse. So you're writing for not just meaning, you're writing for music. It's like almost you're doing a musical composition, and that happens. It all comes together at a certain point, but you have to have time to revise and re-envision. So that's the joy to me of all creative work.
Thank you for doing it so well.
Thank you for your kind response.
When can we read the new story?
Oh, I'm going to read it at Bedtime Stories on the 29th at Mohi. And then I'm going to read it again in Spokane in October. It's not published yet. I just sent it to my agent, so I really can't tell you. I can send you a copy.
Great. I'd love to read it. And would you let us know about the Mohi? Is that open to people? The event at Mohi?
It's a gala that's it's what he described in the beginning. It's bedtime stories.
Right, exactly.
It's
But
Humanities Washington's annual gala.
okay.
Yeah,
So anyone can go.
Yeah, that's right. You've been several times. It's a fundraiser for the Humanities Washington's very important programs to encourage literacy, get parents to read better and to read to their children. So it's a worthy cause.
Good. Thank you. When did you say it was? October?
Well, in Mohi, September 29th.
Right.
7 p.m. Yeah.
Okay.
Gary, you just made it.
And anyone else want to say something before we go?
Thank you so much. It was really.
Thank you, Sharyn. Sharyn is the queen. I'll tell you, she is amazing. She does a great job as program leader. She did a great job with this book, and she's doing a great job hosting these events. She figures out how to record them. She's great.
Thank you.
My
Thank
hero.
you for your help.
I wanted to say just a little short thing here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I'm listening and I'm really trying to listen. And the part that, when you talked about love, I'm not interested in anybody loving me like that. I want a stranger to respect me, And I think if you really want to change somebody's mind, are you listening to them? Do you give them respect? But if you don't give them any respect, nobody wants to listen. Nobody wants to be lectured. Nobody wants to be, it's the thing about, I'm having a hard time trying to say that's why I didn't want to talk about it too much, because I'm trying to formulate how I feel about it. But people don't, if you want me to change my mind, you have to respect what I say.
Mm-hmm.
You have to listen to it. You have to respect my experience. And nobody does that these days. The cool thing about being gay and having a lot of black friends, straight friends, or being black and having white friends and stuff, you just see, wow, people really don't listen.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't listen. So it's important to, it's more important than trying to come up to somebody and try to persuade them or me. You want to show me that you're well-meaning. Listen to what I have to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's not any of that going on to me. It says nobody listens. Nobody. It's just like, I don't even know how you get people to do it, but nobody listens. We don't respect each other. We just don't. And maybe people need to start thinking about that.
Yes.
Levine, I just want to say, I remember hearing your work, and it was very intense for, for presenting your views. That is when we were doing readings based on the anthology that Chuck did. And I certainly remember it because it was so intense, and I did listen. So I think maybe what I'm asking is, do you think you're getting some of this through your work? That you're getting people to listen through the work that you're doing?
Well, I have friends that I listen to, and I just think, no, not always, but it starts with just respecting people. It's not so much about what I'm saying, but I have to be aware of what the person, if somebody's talking to me, I have to listen. It's not just about me sitting off reciting a whole bunch of beliefs that I have. I have to show in action that I respect that person. And I think the only way that you really respect somebody is that you listen to what they have to say, without saying I can't listen to them because they're idiots or they're bigots and all this kind of stuff. We can't do that. That's what we do all the time, man. I have like 3,000 Facebook friends, and a lot of them are liberals, and liberals are just as awful as the other people. They really do. Some of the things that they say, it's not respectful. You're not listening. You gotta listen. You just have. That's the exchange that we have to make. We have to be people that listen to, not just talk, because talk is cheap. It's just,
Do you think that sometimes people don't have the vocabulary to understand? In other words, if you have a way of presenting things, and it's something that I personally have never experienced, maybe you have to explain to me what it is.
right.
Do you see what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I just don't have the words to understand what you might be saying. I am not a gay male, so I don't know. So do you see what I'm getting at?
A little, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just it's the thing that I see when I listen to people and read their posts on the internet and all that, and I is that people just they really don't listen. No, until we really listen to each other and respect, because love. When Martin Luther King, when James Baldwin does it too, every now and then they start to, I read them and they'll start talking about love, and I just say, love is a personal thing.
Yeah.
And when I hear it, it's vague. I just want to be respected.
Well, I think
Yeah,
a
I'm not interested
component
in
of what we were, that Chuck was describing as love is also compassion.
Yeah.
And compassion is not, it's an asset. It has respect in it. Do you see what I mean?
Love can be, well, see, no, it can't have respect in it. It should be respectful. Love can be condescending. I love you. Oh, I love you. But you don't listen to that person. So what good is your love if you're not willing to listen to me and respect me for who I am? It's just like they just somebody that wants to jib. Oh, I love you, but it's from a position of being on top of me, and I'm not interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think anyone is, and I think that what you're describing is what I was mentioning before about the problems with the internet, is that there is no listening on that. If you're looking at social media, forget about it.
This is an old issue. I'm going to quote Epictetus, the philosopher. And he said this: we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And the reason is we're supposed to listen twice as much as we talk. I'll remember to do that. 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen twice as much as we run our mouths. That's my final contribution.
Well, the 3 gates.
Leon, thank you, by the way, too. I'm glad you are part of this.
Yes.
And we listened. we did listen. I'm listening.
Yeah, I'm interested in listening some more. It's really a fascinating subject, especially now because we tend to, instead of listening, we tend to put people in categories. And we kind of typecast people by categories instead of listening to the individual person and trying to understand that person. It's really important. It's something that I think all of us here, I'm sure, I know most of the people here, and all of us here do that. So I'm glad you brought that up because this is the kind of group that you can bring that up in. And you disappeared, sort of.
Oh, I'm just listening.
Still
I'm
there.
listening.
Okay, okay, okay. Anyone else want to say something? We've really gone over, but I think this is really good. It's very good for all of us.
Thank all of you for showing up. This has been a delight
Yes.
and a pleasure. And I know we will all talk in the future
I'm sure we will.
and listen in the future.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much for being here.
Thank
And
you.
next time we have Pauline Caldas, who's an Egyptian American writer who has a somewhat different. She doesn't have a different view from what we've gone over, but she's got a different story, one having to do with relationships of a different sort. So we'll take a look at her next time, and that'll be in about 2 weeks. You'll get a notice. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All of
See,
you.
glad to see some of you who I've never seen before. Bye now.
Bye-bye.